Hello, good crowd. I am so excited. We have with us Shawn Paul, the CEO of Ejido Verde in Mexico today, talking about one of the most remarkable social enterprises I've encountered in years. You don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
Please support the sponsors who made this episode possible, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd and goodcrowd.school. Shawn, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and we're excited to talk about what you're doing down there in Mexico. It's exciting stuff. Tell us a little bit, give us the overview of Ejido Verde.
Well, Ejido Verde, we are a social enterprise based in Michoacan, Mexico, and we grow out of a 90-year commercial relationship between the indigenous forest communities of Michoacan and an industry that has been buying resin tapped from the forests of Michoacan for now 90 years. And this partnership between industry and forest communities gave rise to the formation of Ejido Verde to plant more native pine trees to increase the availability of pine resin for the global pine chemicals industry. That's a very brief overview. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
Shawn,
tell us what the resin is and what it's used for. Why is it valuable?
So pine resin, one of the recordings of the uses of pine resin is in the Bible of Noah's Ark, used pitch to make his boat seaworthy. So we have Greeks have been using pine resin in wine for 5,000 years. Today, pine resin is used commercially in things most common are adhesives, inks, carbonated beverages, chewing gum, food preservatives, fragrances, cleaning materials, sealing. There are 300 commercial applications today that use derivatives made from pine resin. The total market size is $10 billion, and it's a volume of trade equivalent to the volume of cacao traded in the world. So I find it interesting that everybody knows about chocolate and cacao, but none of us know that we use resin in everyday products, every day, everywhere.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable, just as you say, Shawn, that we don't appreciate how much we use it. I had no idea. This is a huge market. Now, you mentioned your corporate partner is a big family business in Mexico. They have deep roots there, but just producing this resin in a big corporation would not qualify certainly as a social enterprise. You're doing some really remarkable things to make this a community-owned project. Tell us a little bit about all the ways in which you're incorporating community and self-governance into this program.
Sure. So Mexico is the number 5 producer of pine resin exports in the world. And of that pine resin in Mexico, 90% of it comes from the state of Michoacan, where we're based. The trees, the forests that are the native trees producing these pine resin are on lands typically owned under community and often indigenous ownership. So we're working in a land tenure regime very different than most of the world that's accustomed to the concept of private property. We work in a region where all land is communally owned. That's because of agrarian reform under the Mexican agrarian law, and that's also a reflection of the indigenous peoples that have lived in this area for over 1,000 years. So there's a fundamental issue that's very innovative in what we're doing of how we deal with basically who owns the future and who owns the land. And we work with the communities to reinforce communal ownership of their land. And we are financing communities to restore the degraded areas of their lands where there's no longer forests. The backdrop is Ejido Verde grows out of the fact that Michoacan is losing its forest at about 66,000 hectares every year for the last 30 years. So we are losing, I don't know, that's 5 Manhattans a year, roughly speaking, are being cut down in Michoacan. A state that was once 100% forest is now left with forest fragments. What that means for the pine resin industry, we used to export Mexico, 60 years, exported 6 60,000 tons of pine resin exports. Today, it's registered at about 20,000 tons. We have 1/4 of the production that we used to have because of land use change and deforestation. Ejido Verde works with the owners and users of the land, indigenous communities that are stewards of their land that for all sorts of reasons are undergoing land use change and land degradation. Ejido Verde provides a finance and technology package to communities to restore their degraded lands. And we work in a tripartite relationship with the landowners, which is the community collectively, and the land user, which is the farmer, or who typically has usufruct rights. So in Michoacan, we have indigenous families that have worked the same piece of land for 7 generations, but they are not owners of the land. The community owns the land. So our innovation, you could say, is how do you lend money to communally owned lands? That's been rarely done. And it's, I'd say in brief, we're using a microfinance model adapted to community financing. Second, I'd say the other innovation for us has to do with the relationship between the community and the farmer, so that everybody has a role. And we're really managing the role of the farmers get benefits and their families, but the community also derive benefits. And what we're doing is we're planting, in effect, agroforestry plantation model with the final density of 800 native trees per hectare. For me, if one family can manage 5 hectares, which is very doable with land available here, one family that we will support to establish 5 hectares, that 5 hectares will provide revenue after 10 years, because the trees we plant today, we need to take care of for 10 years until they start producing resin and revenue. It's another unusual feature that we are lending money to the community that they repay us with resin beginning in year 11, and they finish paying off that investment obligation in year 20. So the community and Ejido Verde, we're making a 20-year commitment to one another, plant trees to produce resin, and the resin produced is, we don't want money back on the investment, we want resin back for the investment we make in establishing these new forests.
So
go ahead.
Will you take all the resin?
We'll buy it all.
Period.
10% of the resin, it comes up roughly 10% of the resin over from year 11 to year 20 will repay the investment. Wow. We call this a zero interest solidarity loan that's repaid in effect. 1 hectare of producing forest, the community has to give us 3,500 kilos of resin over from when there is resin. We're asking for 10% or more if they choose, until they provide us with 3,500 kilos. And we expect that to be 10% of the resin from year 11 to year 20. The other 90%, we guarantee a fair market price. And so we can guarantee them a market at a fair market price for the other 90% of the resin that they're producing.
And then after 20 years, they get 100%, and I presume the tree will continue to produce for a generation.
The tree has the capacity to produce resin and revenue for 3 generations. Or 80 years. 80 years is the natural life of a tree. However, in our model, the community owns the land and the trees. So their obligation to us is to produce resin for 20 years. We're inviting them, not requiring them, to not cut down the tree and to continue producing resin, which we will buy. However, after 20 years, the community and the farmer can choose to cut down the tree and plant another one, which is a viable livelihood alternative for them. And we're creating the incentives to demonstrate that there's everybody wins if we leave the tree standing.
Yeah. Now there are some carbon credit opportunities. To who does the benefit of those carbon credit sales run? Is that going to run to the community, or does that run to Ejido Verde?
I'd say both. So we initiated what would be called the project. Ejido Verde really was born with the hope and aspiration that part of the financing could come from carbon credits. As we've proceeded down the path, we've initiated a whole process of what we call carbon project design. That part of that design begins with community consultations. So we work with communities we've worked with communities over time to define what could a carbon project be, what might the benefits be, how might those benefits be distributed. I think that we are in the early stages of that process, but conceptually, the vision we share with the communities is if we sold carbon credits, half of that money would go to the community and the farmers to pay for and contribute to the opportunity costs that we're asking farmers and communities to take care of trees for 10 years with no revenue. So it would be nice if carbon revenue was part of what compensated them to take care of these new forests for the first 10 years before they're able to tap the resin. That would be half the money. The other half, as in the proposals, would go to contribute to the cost of Ejido Verde to provide all the forestry extension community organizing services that we are providing. So that's something we're committed to, strengthening good governance in communities to manage their forests. And good governance includes that the community knows how to have early detection fires and early response in the case of fire. Good governance is really required that responsible decision making is happening at the community to be good stewards of their forests. So we are committed to that process. Carbon revenue supports strengthening the good governance of those forests, and also carbon revenue supports Ejido Verde to provide training and capacity building to communities on a technical forestry basis to be good forest stewards.
Now, let's review again the scale of this. It seems to me that this creates really a fairly substantial revenue stream, lots of jobs, moves a lot of people into the middle class. Tell us a little bit about this scale.
So our goal is to plant 12,000 hectares. 12,000 hectares is the size of 2 Manhattans. What we've done up to date is we've planted 3,000 hectares. So that's about 3,000 hectares, about 50% of Manhattan, to give a sense of size. The parcels we're planting on are individual family farms. So we're now financing 700 family farms in 15 rural and indigenous communities. The average parcel size that we're planting is about 4 hectares, 4.5 hectares. So that gives one sense of scale. Another way to think about scale is, on average, every day, Ejido Verde is planting 5,000 trees every day. And every tree we plant comes with a 10-year plan to take care of and manage the growth of that tree for 10 years. And that, alongside most of the money we actually spend to plant the trees, is in local jobs in the communities to basically prepare the fields, plant the trees, and tend the trees. So the cost per hectare, 70% of that is jobs in the community. I'd say on average every day, Ejido Verde is creating a new living wage job in these forest communities in Michoacan. I should note that in Michoacan it's been a source of long-term migration to the United States. So given what's going on the whole Mexican border immigration issues, I would argue that every family in the state of Michoacan has family members that live in the United States. And what we're seeing of the job creation opportunities we're creating, we're even seeing people leave the United States to come back to their community and work with Ejido Verde. In terms of jobs last year, we created income and jobs for 1,700 people in their communities, planting and tending forests. Our goal is to have 3,000 family farms participating in this program. And when they participate, they will be earning wages. They will be earning an income equivalent to the wages of a white-collar worker in Mexico City, Lisbon, or Portugal. That wage, we're talking about $15,000 to $20,000 a year for a family. That's an income level that is transformative. And when that income is benefiting 100 families in one community, it is having the effect of really propelling entire communities into the middle class. A resin tapper, and there are 800,000 resin tappers today in the world. There are about 10,000 today in Mexico that earn 30% or more of their income from tapping. And what we're talking about is really adding we're probably going to triple that number. So it's the vision for Ejido Verde aspires to elevate Mexico from being the number 5 producer of resin in the world to becoming the number 2 global producer. And we will quadruple, when realizing our plans, we will quadruple the current production of resin and resin exports in Mexico. And in terms of how many jobs will that create, easily it'll be 10,000 full-time living wage jobs with dignity.
Wow, that's an incredible scale. And when you consider the environmental impacts as well, it's just really inspiring. Some of the credit must go to the Pinoza group that created this concept, at least had the desire to create it, and began building and assembling a team to create this. What's the history there? How did this come about?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So there was a fellow that 90 years ago came from Spain to Michoacan looking for opportunity. And he created basically what do we call it, a little grocery store, a neighborhood store. And he got wind that the whole forestry sector was taking off back then. This is like, 1920s we're talking. And he, because of his connections coming from Spain, he happened to know people in Spain that were making things out of resin. And he saw here that people were all going for the wood and cutting the trees at that time for timber. And this fellow had the idea, hey, I can send some resin, refined resin back to Spain. And this little cottage business grew up into a refinery, and the refinery, it prospered. And the one refinery became 5 refineries, buying resin from the state. Today, this family-owned business group represents 50% of the Mexican market. And they not only got good over the years at buying resin from forest communities, which is not a simple matter, they also got really good at turning resin into derivatives. So there are levels of transformation of pine resin. It gets, first level of transformation, it gets turned into commodities, which are called turpentine and gum rosin. And those global commodities are then turned into specialty ingredients or derivatives. And this group over 90 years got really good, not only buying the resin, but turning the resin into these specialty ingredients. So they now sell to, to global corporations, global food and beverage corporations, for example, will buy from this group the specialty ingredients. Every bottle of carbonated beverage, if you think about the colas, the Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, every bottle in the world has a little bit of pine resin. Just gives you a sense of the size of the market reach.
I'm your biggest customer.
Well, we're in Gatorade too. We have some healthy examples. We're in chewing gum, but I thank you. I guess the resin industry thanks you for being
you're very welcome.
Dedicated customer.
You're very welcome.
I think what happened in the group, now this group, the business went from grandfather to father to son. And the son is my age and is now really has a leading role in the Pinoza group. And I think what he was observing were 2 things. One, the industry's losing their raw material supply. Demand for their products is growing and the raw material is shrinking. And if you look at all the trends, I think he and I would agree, if nothing is done, this industry will go extinct in 30 years as a consequence of systemic deforestation. So beginning 2009, he was looking at this strategic question. And he also, I think, was mindful that the prosperity of the industry is based on this relationship with these forest communities, which, we argue are modest or low income populations. So I think he was thinking about how do we solve the strategic issue in a way that we also give back to the communities that are the basis of prosperity of the industry. And in exploring how to give back, one of the things they learned in the early days, giving money away and giving trees away didn't work. So the idea of handouts or philanthropy, while they were open to the idea and they tried it, it didn't have the desired effect. You give trees away, they die, most of them. So the model that evolved, rather than giving philanthropy, how might we create a social enterprise that can be a win-win, skin in the game. Everybody has skin in the game, raise all ships. And that's really, with that mindset, was the birth of Ejido Verde as a social enterprise. And the belief was not only can it be a solution to wealth inequality, poverty, and climate change, it's as a business solution, we're creating an integrated supply chain solution to have a reliable, local, high-quality supply of pine resin. And so that's really where the model Ejido Verde began. And the group, one of the things that I love about working at Ejido Verde, my investors, their success is based on trial and error. These are chemists. They're all chemical engineers. Trial and error. That's how business and science usually works. And that culture is really, I think, ingrained in Ejido Verde. So for us, failure is part of the journey. And that's how we learn, and that's how we get better. And we've had many iterations of the model. So we had trial and error from 2009 to 2014. I joined in 2015, where I just took what I'd say a rough model and clarified the model. And so that's now what we're scaling is a business model that really is the culmination of trial and error, a lot of exchange between industry and forest communities about what works and what doesn't. And now here I am now scaling this model that really got solidified really 2015, 2016.
Shawn, as you look back over your experiences the last 5 years working on this project, what's the most important lesson you've learned?
Every community that we work is unique. Every person is unique. We need scalable models that can adapt to the unique essence of every person and every place. So that's one lesson that's being reinforced. We can't have a cookie cutter model and do the exact same thing everywhere. So that, I'd say, is one lesson. I think another lesson, there's some basic values that are just so important that we take for granted that are so important. And to me, the key among these foundational values are honesty and transparency. So those, I'm in an environment where those aren't, it doesn't happen every day. Really building on that foundation, we're building long-term business and commercial relationships. They need to be built on relationship of trust. One basis of trust, right, are these issues of honesty and transparency and accountability. So I'd say that is one. The other thing I think is important is how we envision the time, change over time. So I come in, I'm an American hired by Mexicans to grow a Mexican company, and I got that, whatever, the Silicon Valley itch of how we can, go through rapid scaling. And I'm working in an environment where people need a lot more time to digest information and make decisions. So I really think that we need to, while the urgency for the industry is urgent, action on climate change is urgent, but communities need to make solid, well-grounded decisions that are going to endure. We need to really make decisions at the pace that communities are comfortable with. And I'd say that's slower than I would prefer, but it's the right pace. Yeah.
Well, Shawn, what is your superpower?
My superpower. What would you say? What motivates me when I get up in the morning, or what's my secret sauce?
What's your secret sauce? What's the skill, the strength, the character, whatever it may be, that enables you to do what you do well?
I'd say if I think about two things, a key one is listening. It's just so important to listen well. It's something that doesn't happen enough in the world. So who are my customers? Who are my stakeholders? What are their needs? What are their aspirations? How do I reconcile those needs and aspirations of my stakeholders? Stakeholders being farmers, community leaders, investors, industry. So listening really well, I think, with an empathetic ear. I think that would be one quote unquote secret sauce. I think the other thing that helps me do what I do is be able to bridge an inspiring vision and turn it into an executable plan. So I work in an environment where some people love to dream and brainstorm, and a lot of other people, that makes them nervous and uncomfortable. Many people need clarity and certainty. So I'm a great bridge builder between envisioning the world of possibilities and building a bridge into what's actionable and doable. So bridging vision to action.
Excellent. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. It's been really a joy to connect and hear the story of Ejido Verde firsthand. I know you're busy, you've got to go, but before you go, would you take just a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Ejido Verde and how they can connect with you personally?
We love hearing from people. Ejido Verde, I think you're going to have the spelling somewhere, Ejido Verde, means roughly green community in English. EjidoVerde.com. We have a website. Sign up for our mailing list. Join us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. We have a lot of activity there. Ejido Verde MX for our page on Facebook. We're also on Instagram and Twitter. And to reach me directly, love hearing from you. It's Shawn, SHAUN, at EjidoVerde.com.
Fantastic. Well, Shawn, again, thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you every success in pulling off this incredible project in Michoacan.
It's a real pleasure, and we love visitors. It's a way we elevate our effectiveness, influence, and competitive advantage through relationships of cooperation. So we welcome hearing from people that would like to visit and see what we're up to.
Fantastic. Again, we wish you well.
Thank you.
All righty. Let's do some good.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
At goodcrowd.school, 5% of what you pay to learn how to make a difference goes to nonprofits working to eradicate extreme poverty, improve global health, and reverse climate change by 2045. So when you take a course to learn how to change the world, you do change the world. Get started at goodcrowd.school today. Thanks for tuning in to the Your Mark on the World show, the Social Impact Podcast. Please subscribe via YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify.